Out of all the weapons and engines of war fielded by the Imperium, there are none that can even hope to match the sheer terror and destructive capabilities of a Titan. These colossal war machines are basically walking buildings and have such incredibly powerful weaponry that they can destroy entire city blocks with a single salvo. Rightfully called God Engines, each Titan is not only a deadly tool of warfare, but a relic and symbol of humanity's right to rule the stars. Every single one of them is driven by ancient and powerful machine spirits that thirst for battle, requiring an equally stern human pilot to guide their wrath at the cost of their own, often short and painful lives. Titans have played a key role for the last several millennia and even predated the Imperium. They are worshipped as living incarnations of the Omnissiah and manifestations of his will. So take a seat on your control throne and let's take a look at every Imperial Titan. Titans are a classification of walker, a bipedal war machine that is very common in the 40k universe. Walkers are typically equipped with heavy weaponry and armored enough to survive all but the heaviest damage, all on a pair of legs that allow them to stride through terrain that most tanks couldn't hope to navigate. Titans, however, are large enough to be terrain, their weaponry going beyond what you might find on the average battle tank and into classifications usually reserved for spacefaring vessels. Originally built by the tech priests of Mars on the Red Planet itself, the Titans would see their first combat in the wars against the Psi Carnivora during the Age of Strife, a techno-cult of dangerous heretics who directly opposed the Red Priests of the Mechanicus. To combat another technologically advanced cult, the priests of the Omnissiah created the Collegia Titanica and the very first god engines, which eventually won them the war. The Collegia Titanica manages every Titan Legion, training and distributing crew and prescribing new tactics and weapon loadouts. Each Titan Legion claims a single Forge world as their home base, and usually takes the name of that world as well. Each Legion has its own culture and slight variations on organization, but usually each one has around 50 mighty god engines organized into squad-like structures called maniples. In terms of crew, typically each Titan has on average at least one Princeps and two Moderati, adepts who don't just pilot and operate the Titan, but are the Titan. This command crew are hardwired into the machine with neural links controlling the weapons and systems like parts of their own bodies and communing with its dangerous machine spirit. The Imperium flatly bans the use of artificial intelligence, so the Mechanicus gets around this by harnessing a lesser type of intelligence that they call a machine spirit, which acts more or less like an instinctual presence in almost every system the Imperium uses. Because this is still the far future, and automation is needed if humanity wants to stay on top. Unfortunately for machines as big as Titans, this means the machine spirits are incredibly powerful and oppressive. Many crews eventually burn out trying to control them, and it's often the fate of the Princeps in charge of piloting a Titan to eventually lose themselves entirely to the superior will of their god engine. But that's still a small price to pay, as Titans have been used to win battles for millennia, and their power is sorely needed as the enemies of humanity close in. So now that we have an idea of what we are discussing, let's dive right in with our first entry, the Warhound. These are the smallest of the Titans, but that doesn't make them any less terrifying, as each one is capable of destroying an entire tank battalion by itself, and in small groups can even take down larger Titans. A Warhound carries a crew of around 6 between the Princeps, Moderati, and the Tech Priest running its reactor, as well as around 4 to 7 servitors. It's typically somewhere around 14 meters or almost 46 feet tall, and weighs in at 410 metric tons. It has 2 hardpoints for weapons, light armor totaling 95 millimeters for both the hull and superstructure each, and 2 void shield generators for limited protection. The silhouette of this god engine is unique even among other Titans. The hunched posture, inverted knees, and canine head give the impression of a loping predator, an almost literal wolf striding through ruins in packs. Warhounds are used as scouts, using their superior sensor suites to identify and track threats at huge ranges while hunting them down or laying ambushes for larger targets. Their smaller size allows them to weave into close confines that other Titans would either find too dangerous or simply be unable to navigate. Their speed allows them to discover enemy positions and quickly duck back into cover to safely relay the information to the rest of their legion. Even in off-road terrain, a Warhound can move at an astonishing 42 kilometers per hour or 26 miles per hour. That's enough to outflank and outmaneuver larger Titans, giving them the safety they need to slowly whittle larger god engines down as they attempt to escape. Of course, their size means they can't be equipped with weaponry larger than a plasma blast gun or a Vulcan megabolter, but multi-configuration mounts allow these nimble Titans to have the luxury of swapping out guns before each engagement, depending on the situation. And smaller Titan weapons are still more than enough to shred the Warhound's usual targets, which are tanks and massed infantry, while still allowing them to harass their larger prey, especially when deploying in groups, which they often are. Even the Warhound's machine spirits are often very wolf-like, with sub-variants like the Jackal and Mastiff making use of pack tactics and almost instinctively driving their crew to hunt down fleeing targets, something Warhound princeps have to be very aware of if they hope to keep their larger Titans on a short leash. Legio Audax is notable for being made up of almost exclusively Warhounds and its variants, with one of their biggest victories being recorded at the Battle of Nuceria, where a maniple of over 20 of the Wolfish Scout Titans slowly harassed and brought down a monstrous Emperor-class Trader Titan, one of the largest god engines in existence. Using their speed and size to dive into and out of the larger Titan's range, the Warhounds eventually weakened it enough to use experimental harpoons to topple the giant walker, winning them the day. The Warhound proves that speed and positioning is king on the battlefield. Our first major variant on this list, the Direwolf, is an up-armored Warhound with flat feet designed to stabilize the vehicle for shooting purposes and a more powerful reactor to allow for heavier weaponry. Otherwise, it has the same rough stats as its quicker brother. The Warhound is an active hunter and pursuit Titan, but the Direwolf is an ambush predator whose purpose is to hunt and destroy enemy Titans. It slinks carefully into forward positions, its low posture helping it hide in ravines and between buildings, and then it just waits for the right moment to strike. To help with this role, the Direwolf is equipped with an armor-bursting neutron laser, a conversion beam dissipator, or even a volcano cannon on its upper carapace. And this massive weapon, which is usually reserved for larger Titans, allows the Direwolf to take down just about anything on the battle with decisive surprise attacks. It's not defenseless in closer engagements either, being armed with 2 Defensor Megabolters, essentially a stripped-down Vulcan Megabolter, to take on smaller vehicles and troops that might attempt to trap it in close-in areas the Direwolf likes to hide in. A rare sight compared to the Warhound, the Direwolf doesn't have the appeal to glory-seeking Titan princeps that a Reaver might, but it's hard to deny the effectiveness of a group of 5 or 6 Direwolves coordinating their devastating fire suddenly on an unsuspecting battle Titan. The first of the battle Titans on our list is the venerable Reaver. Battle Titans are the engines that are designed to withstand open battle, and even though the Reaver is still relatively small, it is more than capable of standing and fighting, and its speed ensures it has a definitive role in any maniple it operates in. A Reaver typically stands over 22 meters or 72 feet tall, with 2 massive arms and a place on its upper carapace for another weapon mount. Defense-wise, the Reaver has 4 void shield generators to help take the sort of damage that can happen in drawn-out engagements, and 120 millimeters of thickness for both its hull and superstructure, which is more than 60 extra millimeters of armor than the Warhound. This, of course, affects its top speed, putting it at around 19 kilometers or 12 miles per hour on open terrain. Much slower than the Warhound, but faster than its larger cousins, providing the ability to skirmish effectively with enemy god engines and tank battalions. Even its one vulnerability, the location of its plasma reactor at the rear of the engine, instead of being housed safely in its core, is negated by its speed and maneuverability. Surprisingly, the Reaver has less crew than a Warhound, only a Princeps, 2 Moderati, and a Tech Priest to run the reactor. This is probably because the Reaver is built to take a fair amount of damage, and so running on minimal crew helps with keeping them operational, even if large sections of the walker are destroyed. Its main armaments tend to be larger Titan weapons like laser and Gatling blasters, volcano cannons, and of course, a massive Apocalypse missile launcher on the carapace spinal mount. But that's just the usual loadout. Reaver variants like the Vandal class typically use short-ranged melta-cannons and the colossal Titan Power Fist to engage close-up where most large tanks and especially larger Titans have a more difficult time bringing their best weaponry to bear. And that's really the specialty of the Reaver. It doesn't have one. It's fast enough to outflank larger opponents, it has tougher armor than the Scout Titans. As a Vandal class, it can be very short-ranged. As a Goth class, it can be a mobile artillery piece. It's really one of the most versatile god engines in the whole lineup, which is probably the reason it has survived into the 42nd millennium when so many other specialized Titans have faded into the hazy past. The only battlefield that Reavers really struggle with are cities, as the close confines and reduced visibility leave the enormous walker exposed and a prime target for ambushes, which is a theme you'll see repeated as we discuss larger and larger Titans. These big war machines are definitely safer when they have space to roam and can see the threats coming. Regardless, other forces such as the Astra Militarum or the Space Marines value the Reaver greatly due to its skill at providing close support during shock assaults or breaking open enemy fortresses. Its devastating firepower and ability to duel even much larger enemy god engines make the Reaver a solid choice for integrating into allied forces. As Titans get bigger, so too must the weaponry, and nothing exemplifies this more than the Warbringer Nemesis Titan. Much less definitive information is known about the Warbringer compared to the other Titans on our list today, likely because it has such a specialized role that they are rarely deployed. We do know that it is crewed by at least 7 adepts, the Princeps, 4 Moderati, and 2 tech priests. We're also told that the Warbringer stands somewhere between the height of a Reaver and a Warlord Titan, and that it has massively thick frontal plating to weather return fire. And yeah, that's not very specific, but it does start to paint a picture of what sort of priorities the scribes had when writing down the information about the Warbringer, because along with the specific reference to thicker armor on the engine's front, we know a lot about its armaments. 2 arm mounts can take equipment very similar to the Reaver Titan, mostly laser blasters and volcano cannons. And since this war machine is getting quite large, it has our first example of the anti-air and anti-infantry turrets common to the truly colossal Titans further down on our list. 3 Ardex Defensor Mauler bolt cannon turrets sit under the shoulders to take care of armor and infantry, while a pair of Anvilus air defense batteries sit on the back of a Warbringer's upper carapace alongside the main gun. And we saved that main gun for last because it's the real reason the Warbringer is still used. Sitting up high on the carapace is a truly gigantic weapon. This is typically a massive quake cannon, but can also be a Nemesis volcano cannon, 2 pieces of war gear so large that they can't be mounted on anything smaller than a Warlord Titan, and they have been strapped to the top of this smaller vehicle anyway. The quake cannon is a colossal artillery piece able to shoot its tank-sized shells over 24 kilometers accurately and punch through meters-thick armor plating. The Nemesis volcano cannon is the largest laser weapon the Imperium can load onto a land-based vehicle. It pulls terawatts of power directly from the Titan's plasma reactor and can rip through even a Warlord's armor with a single shot. The Warbringer Nemesis is a Titan hunter, designed to sit back behind the main battle line and snipe at larger opponents who dare to give it a clean shot. The huge top-mounted gun is the reason for the Titan's wide and stable feet, why it needs extra turrets to protect its vulnerable flanks from attack, and why it requires 2 tech priests to run. Aside from the strain on the reactor that a Nemesis volcano cannon would create, a quake cannon presents its own problems. It's a huge, cumbersome artillery piece that is reloaded with a massive revolver-style chamber. No matter what the Warbringer is armed with, it needs that extra tech priest to operate it and to help control the famously bloodthirsty machine spirit. All Titans are a bit difficult to control, their ancient minds hungering for war at all times, but the Warbringer's purpose seemingly makes its machine spirit a little overeager, and it's been reported that the Titan will often target lock and power its main gun in response to a threat that the crew hasn't even noticed yet. The Warbringer came to prominence during the Horus Heresy when traitor legions enlisted the help of the less than loyal Titan legions, and the need for something like the Warbringer became more urgent. Large Titans like the Warlord can and do slay other god engines all the time, but it's often done in drawn-out duels, the 2 massive walkers brawling across a battlefield until one of them makes a mistake, or they run so low on power that a shot can get through the many layers of void shields. But the Warbringer cuts through all of that, and often with a single well-placed shot. They do require protection, of course, as they can't move very fast, and all of their armor is on the front end, but the most common maniple formation for the Warbringer has 4 Warhounds guarding against flank attacks and spotting for the Warbringer's giant Titan-killing guns. Bristling with insanely powerful weapons covered in defensive turrets and boasting thick armor and more void shields than a full hunting maniple of scout engines, the Warlord Titan is the backbone of any Titan Legion and the despoiler of millions of battlefields across the galaxy. Standing almost 33 meters or 108 feet tall, the Warlord is crewed by up to 12 expertly trained adepts, 1 princeps, up to 5 moderati, and 2 tech priests, along with up to 34 servitors to maintain the systems, load weaponry, and operate defensive turrets. While other Titans typically have 2 arm-mounted weapons and the occasional carapace mount, the Warlord decided that wasn't enough and has 4 weapon mounts, each capable of bringing a full Titan-grade weapon in addition to its anti-air and infantry defensive weapons. Typically, the larger weapons are things like volcano cannons and triple-barreled laser blasters, but as we said earlier, it can also mount the larger Quake Cannon, Nemesis Volcano Cannon, or even a pair of Apocalypse missile launchers, the same type that the Reaver usually only has 1 of. The defensive turrets are very similar to the Warbringer Nemesis loadout, that being a pair of Mauler bolt cannons mounted under the shoulders and 2 Ardex defensor turrets fitted with twin las cannons along the top carapace. And all of this is mounted onto a frame with armor roughly 600 millimeters or 2 feet thick on the front, supported by 6 void shields. Aside from having superior armor and weapons, the Warlord also maintains some highly advanced technology. While the Warbringer and Direwolf stabilize themselves by sheer weight and reinforced legs, the Warlord does the same thing using internal gyros and gravitational stabilizers. In addition, a Warlord Titan's Auspex systems are easily some of the most advanced throughout the Imperium, as it is capable of fighting combatants using thermal imaging, triangulating positions using enemy Vox signals, and echolocation so sensitive it can even use the noise made by falling objects. Its most impressive feat, however, is its capability of detecting and targeting the distinct sounds made by void shields during low visibility conditions such as sandstorms, where other ways of targeting an enemy become more difficult or outright impossible. The Warlord's only weakness is the position of its plasma reactor. Seated in its abdominal cavity, should an enemy breach the carapace plating protecting that reactor, it could lead to a nuclear blast capable of taking out an entire maniple. A secondary weakness is also present, namely in the cockpit, as not only is a Warlord vulnerable to being decapitated, but on 2 separate occasions, an Orca Daredevil was able to breach the cockpit and butcher the Titan's operators in brutal close combat by entering through the eyes. This is more of a weakness that all larger Titans share, however, and it's a fairly rare occurrence. The Warlord is the most common and iconic Titan fielded by the Imperium, so millions have been produced. At the height of the Horus Heresy, Warlord Titans trampled and stomped across the battlefield, crushing entire armies underneath their metal feet. Like other god engines, the Warlord has several variants depending on the Forge world that created them. The Mars Alpha is the standard variant we described earlier. The older Lucius pattern, which was used during the Great Crusade, is a boxy and less ornate version. The Proximus pattern requires its princeps to have a deeper connection, being hooked into a tank of amniotic fluids and losing themselves to the link between them and their Titan. Subclasses exist as well that cover specific battlefield roles, with Custodian Titans incorporating a massive custodian bell and preaching balconies to drive the warriors of the Imperium to fight harder, or the Night Gaunt, which is fitted for closer combat using a massive Titan fist and short-ranged guns. And of course, the Nemesis class, which makes the Warlord a long-range powerhouse. Most unique is the weapon head, which swaps the usual cockpit for a massive gun. Yes, it's goofy, yes, the Mechanicum hates it, as it turns a Warlord from a mighty godlike warwalker to a more or less static weapon emplacement. The Warlord is iconic for a reason, and adaptability seems to be it. No other Titan can be built in such numbers or be so effective. Psi-Titans are an extremely unique version of the Warlord that really required its own entry. They are built specifically to radiate terror, possessing unique and forbidden war gear from the dark age of technology in order to power the psychic crew operating it. Each Psi-Titan is operated by 2 psychic moderati bound to their machine with a preceptor intendant, a blank, which is someone immune to the warp, and trained to command a Psi-Titan without being affected by its horrific weaponry. So far, the only Psi-Titans recorded were all based on the Warlord class, known as the Warlord Sinister, and they manifested psychic powers on a scale that can only be described as apocalyptic, projecting waves of fear, psychokinesis, and draining the life out of its victims. Their main weapon is the Sinistra Manus Tenebrae, also called a Psi Cannon, which unleashes effects similar to that of a vortex weapon, tearing literal holes in reality. Unfortunately, this powerful weapon has to be used only when absolutely necessary, as every time it fires, it has a chance of simply consuming one of the psychic moderati on board. To further distinguish Psi-Titans from their counterparts is the fact that they belong to the Ordo Sinister, a very unique order of the Collegia Titanica, which is based on Holy Terra itself. It is believed that Ordo Sinister possesses some 20 Warlord Sinister Titans, and that they might have other classes of modified Titans. They are considered the left hand of the Emperor, and only take their orders from the Master of Mankind, which even extended to the Siege of Terra, where Ordo Sinister refused to fight without direct orders from the Emperor himself. The type of psychic weaponry used in this Titan is so closely guarded that even Primarchs could not be trusted with their control, which is probably best, as there have been examples of a single Psi-Titan forcing a planetary rebellion into submission without firing a shot. And so with such terrifying powers at their fingertips, the Ordo Sinister waits on Terra for their next orders from the Emperor and no one else. It seems a waste to sideline some of the most powerful Titans in the Imperium, so maybe someone should convince them to listen to Guilliman? It's a bit of a pattern that as we discuss larger and larger Titans, they keep getting more and more elusive, and aside from the Psi-Titans, there are none on this list held more secretive than the Warmaster Titans. One of the oldest god engines in existence, the Warmaster was used alongside the Warlord in the battles with Psi Carnivora, but for a large part of its history, the Warmaster was kept an extremely guarded secret from the rest of the Imperium. What we know is fragmented, but it seems that most Warmasters stand roughly 41 meters or 134 feet tall and maintain a crew of up to 15 members. A princeps, as usual, 6 moderati, tech priests, and dozens of servitors for specialized repair work. More on that in a moment. The Warmaster has 7 void shields and ceramite plasteel composite armor that measures over a meter or almost 4 feet thick in some places. What's most telling is that this Titan requires a primary and secondary plasma reactor, one of which is entirely given over to powering the weapon systems. The standard Warmaster is armed with 2 suzerain pattern plasma destructors, massively destructive plasma weaponry capable of obliterating even most other Titans in a single burst, but they also typically have Revelator heavy missiles, a pair of double-barreled turbo laser destructors, and inferno guns, and can mount other Titan-grade weapons like melta-cannons, Vulcan megabolters, plasma blast guns, and apocalypse missile launchers. And before you ask if we're done, of course not. They also have a massive array of Ardex defensor turrets, including 4 autocannons, 2 shoulder cannons, at least 1 twin-length las cannon, and a missile launcher. And to add more terror to the description, the only variant of the Warmaster, the Iconoclast Titan, is equipped with siege drills, grav weapons, and a chainsword the size of a building. Iconoclasts are used to break sieges by charging headfirst into large emplacements or larger Titans, completely bypassing their void shields and tearing them apart at close range. So now that you have a full scope of this monster, we can talk about why it exists and why it was kept secret for so long. From what we can tell, the Warmaster was used as a protector for their various forge worlds. Every Titan Legion had at least one of these things powered down and kept in shrouded vaults, with even high-ranking Mechanicus adepts never speaking about them. The idea seems to be that in the most dire of circumstances, these god engines would be activated to defend their forge world, arriving out of nowhere to obliterate even the most powerful enemy war machines, including other Titans. Of course, just like about everything else, the Horus Heresy ruined this system of defense. The traitorous Fabricator General of Mars, Kelbor Hal, allied with Warmaster Horus, creating the Dark Mechanicus and giving the traitor Titan legions access to several Warmaster Titans in an attempt to tip the scales in their favor. This didn't work, but it did make the existence of Warmasters known to the wider Imperium, and so while they are still used as defensive sentinels today, they aren't the terrifying secret they used to be. Next, we have the largest of all Titans, the colossal Emperor Titan. These immense walking mountains of metal and ceramite are the largest mobile battle units that can be deployed on a planet's surface, each requiring powerful technology to even stand under their own weight, and as such, are amongst the rarest war machines in the galaxy. It's so rare, in fact, that there are very few specifics about them. Varying reports tell us that the average height of an Emperor class is about 150 meters or 492 feet tall. They are crewed by a literal battalion of standard Titan crew, tech priests, and servitors, not to mention the ability to keep an entire Militarum regiment or Skitarii legion on board for defense or transportation purposes. Its armor is so thick and it's protected by 12 void shield generators, making the Emperor-class rival even planetary defense installations and requiring more than one plasma reactor to even function. Each Emperor class also brings enough weapons with it to turn the tides of an entire war, with its arm mounts alone requiring special variants of standard Titan weaponry, like the Plasma Annihilator, Hellstorm Cannon, or Doomstrike missile launchers. These are supported by 6 other Titan-grade weapons mounted along the carapace, flak turret towers for anti-air along the top, and bolter turrets on the legs to fend off infantry assaults. Many of these weapons are mounted on one of the most unique features of an Emperor Titan, a massive cathedral placed on its upper carapace. When you think of the walking church, this is it. The fortresses perched on the shoulders of each Emperor Titan are massive, armored cathedrals housing barracks and devotional chambers, turning the whole vehicle into a religious icon. To go with its importance and size, the machine spirits of Emperor Titans are extremely powerful and do not like being controlled. It takes a very experienced and strong-willed princeps to control one of these god engines, and they are often the masters of entire Titan legions, since each legion might only have 2 or 3 of these colossal war machines. But even that isn't enough in some cases, as an Emperor spirit is capable of killing the entire linked crew if it gets impatient or angry. As you would imagine, there are subclasses even for this King of Titans: the Imperator, which is the standard loadout, and the Warmonger, which specializes in long range. But every Emperor Titan is a walking fortress, a headquarters and command center for the largest Imperial campaigns fought across the galaxy. In battle, only other Titans can even hope to threaten an Emperor class, whether they be traitor Titans of similar build or strange Xenos Titans and tight-scale organisms. The Orcs especially take great joy in constructing scrap Titans which can challenge these god engines, famously creating monstrosities such as Godbreaker, which defeated the Emperor Titan Storm Herald during the battle for Hell's Reach during the Third War for Armageddon. The Castigator has a very strange history. Created in the Dark Age of technology, this was, as far as anyone can tell, the original Titan, with all newer versions being an attempt to recreate its design. The original was lost on the Forge world, Chironia. Shortly after its creation, the whole planet eventually getting pulled into the warp, so its STC went undiscovered for millennia, leaving Titan builders to guess at its construction. And so, of course, nothing that the humans of the Age of Strife or the Imperium created ever came close. The Castigator stands taller than even the tallest Emperor-class Titans, with its head sitting on top of its shoulders instead of in the chest like the hunched design so common in the Imperium. The STC didn't include any specific weaponry, but it seemed capable of infusing or creating new weapons from its body. Whether this is from its intended design or because of its possession by a demon, we can't be sure. Oh, did we forget to mention that? Yeah, this thing became possessed at some point during its stay in the warp, and we're not talking about the possession common in Chaos-aligned Titans, but the type of possession that happens to sentient individuals, because the Castigator wasn't designed to have a crew, it was autonomous and had true artificial intelligence. Like we mentioned earlier, the Imperium doesn't mess with AI for a reason, and one of them is that sentient machines are just as susceptible to corruption as any other sentient creature is, and so when a strike force of Grey Knights discovered the corrupted Father of Titans on the long-lost Forge world, they were forced to destroy it. So while the Castigator never got a chance to storm across the battlefields of the galaxy, it felt wrong to have a list of humanity's Titans without at least mentioning it. Clearly, we are going to have to do another video on the Titans of other armies now, but in the meantime, why don't you tell us which Imperial Titan you'd take into battle with the hated Traitor Titan legions or the horrible Xenos hordes? And while you're there, why not subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on more lore?